What will you do to unlock innovation? In today's fast-paced world, innovation might not be enough. Tomorrow's pioneers of change will need to be agile, able to adapt, and committed like never before. Your host, Sana Vinding, invites you to listen in and join business leaders from around the world as they share their visions for success in our future business challenges.
Welcome to Mind Innovation. I'm your host, Sana Vinding. I'm always excited to learn. And in today's podcast, we're going to talk about what determines whether a startup will fail or succeed. I want to welcome Kim and Todd Saxton, the award-winning professors at the Indiana University Kelley School of Business, and also co-authors of the Titanic Effect. So welcome to both of you, Kim and Todd. I'm really looking forward to the chat today. And I really like your background, I have to say that.
Thank you. The fun part of this, both of our backgrounds, is my mom took those pictures for us from a cruise ship.
That's good. That's good. It's always connections here, right? And being one unit here. So let's jump in it. So my first, I want to know about passions, and I'm here because I have my passion about this podcast. So I would like to ask each of you, where does your passion from entrepreneurship and startup, where does that come from?
Kim, go ahead, Todd. I'll let you. Go ahead. We're both going to defer to each other. I guess we've done this too much. Yeah. So I think, first of all, it's important. We are business school professors. So part of our passion is about teaching. And after we got our PhDs, I spent about 7 years in industry, and I really loved it because I was managing a team. And I felt like I was still a teacher, but, it's like I had a longer term relationship with my class, and I still am close with the folks who worked for me, and they reach out to me whenever they have questions in my area of influence. So it's kind of funny. But once we started teaching, Indianapolis is a hotbed of startup activity. And we just had people reach out to us and ask us questions, and we would start to take coffees. And the next thing you knew, we had several hundred of these coffees a year, and we were getting—
You never slept. No.
No. We could have not sleep. Some of them were lunches, to be fair.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And you have to have the beers at the end of the night, or the drinks that offsets the caffeine. Yeah. So
yeah.
Everything's a balance.
And so we started working with groups that support startups. And so Todd was the president of the Venture Club of Indiana. And then, will you tell more about all the things that you've done in the startup space, Todd?
Sure. Well, and we are passionate about startups, both of us. And I think we have a special love for life science and healthcare related startups. But more broadly, and I think one of the things that at least I find most appealing is, and this gets back to kind of the core passion, I love learning as much as I love teaching. And every time I'm working with one of these really talented entrepreneurs who has great ideas, I'm learning about their markets, whether it's, shoe inserts or diabetes and community activities. And, it's just, there's such a wealth of learning that happens when you get exposed to these entrepreneurs, their passion about what they're doing. And to some degree, at least, I'm not becoming an expert, certainly, but I'm learning about these markets, these challenges, these problems that people are trying to deal with. And we've accumulated enough experience ourselves that we're often, or sometimes at least, in a position to help these people along their journey. And that's the second piece that I think we're both very passionate about, is being able to enable the innovator. And so when we think of the entrepreneur, it's typically about the de novo enterprise, the startup. And certainly that's a big part of what we do. But there are corporate innovators, people at very large organizations, people at universities who are equally passionate about and committed to innovation, that don't necessarily want to start the next unicorn or, big company that goes through an exit, but they want to contribute to changing their own organization or changing their market or helping their company develop new services or new products. And at least some of the barriers, or what we call the icebergs or debt-bergs that they run into, are very similar when you're innovating in a larger organization or as a startup. So those are some of the things, at least, or threads building on what Kim was saying, that I think we're passionate about.
Yeah, no, I can see the passion, right? That's also one, that's why I ask it, because it's so good to see when you're like, oh, this is my topic and I love to learn, and it's so good. So when you just said, right, so why are startup? Why are they failing? Because it's a high percentage, right? Is it 70% or how high?
Typically 70% over a 10-year period, as much as 50% in a 3 to 5 year period. And it's pretty well studied by a number of groups. And there are two main factors that lead to a failure. There are a whole bunch, we call it a dozen, but the two biggest ones or most frequent ones are, first of all, there's really no market for the product. So that's a hard thing about innovation is I have this really cool idea, I want to share it. And then you find out, well, maybe you're the only one who had that problem, or actually to create the solution is so expensive that nobody wants to pay for it.
Yeah.
So poor product market fit. And that's one of our Detbergs as well, is, truly understanding what is the problem you're solving. Is this a problem a lot of people have? Is this a problem people are willing to pay to fix?
Yeah.
And the second one is they run out of money. It takes a lot of money. I was just speaking to an entrepreneur last week who said that he struggled with some feedback he was given, because basically he was told, get a couple $1 million and start advertising. He's like, as if.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, I'll go to the tree, right? The money tree, and then get started.
But Todd talks more about why that whole investment kind of falls apart. I don't know if you want to add something about that piece, Todd.
Yeah, so a couple pieces. One, those numbers and those percents are pretty well established, but as you can imagine, it's way more nuanced than just what percent starts or fails. Because first, it's like what percent even actually gets off the ground, right? There are so many ideas on the back of the napkin. As Kim knows, sadly, I've got 1,000 ideas that I've even gotten 20, 30 websites. But they never even started, so they never had the opportunity to fail. But that's part of how my mind works, and it's
it's the validation process, isn't it, as well, in that beginning or that messy upfront?
Yeah, and so in academia we call these the nascent entrepreneurs, the people who could be starting something, but the far majority actually don't, right? So enabling them, and so those aren't counted as failures, but to me, it's a lost opportunity in some ways if they don't choose to move forward. So from a very academic, in some ways, perspective, what do you call the start of an organization? Is when you have a website, when you sell to your first customer, when you incorporate, what's the defining moment that says this is the birth of the venture, right? But on the other end too, there's not a really defined dying of a venture. Sometimes you pull the plug and it's pretty obvious, but there are a lot of zombie ventures out there that are on, they should be on life support and they're still moaning and, moving forward with one person, and the website, they get 2 hits every 3 years or something, but they haven't officially pulled the plug. So, that whole life and death of a venture to me is a really interesting thing. Yeah. But the piece that I think we've tried to focus on in our work, our helping educate entrepreneurs, working with startups, are the pieces that are inside the control of the entrepreneur. There's a lot that the entrepreneur can't control in terms of how long it takes for business to business customers to start up, and going viral. Everybody would love to go viral, right? But there's no secret formula to how you get that to happen. And it's a lot less in fashion over the last year to go viral. I've noticed the use of that term has diminished quite a bit. But there are these things that are decisions that entrepreneurs make that can lead to their undoing and either never get off the ground or a short-lived venture. And that's what we've tried to capture in the Titanic Effect, or what we call these Detbergs, these decisions in these different oceans that kind of systematically keep the venture from moving forward and perhaps even sink it. And those are within the control. Those are decisions that entrepreneurs can get better at, and other innovators. And that's what we're trying to shed a light on.
So I'm curious about, because you have so much experience here as well and knowledge. So the skill set, if you say that's a handful of skill set that will be really good for you if an entrepreneur, right, to succeed. Have the skill set, have that changed over the last couple of years, and especially the last 2 years?
Gosh, that's a really good question. No one has ever asked So I think we're both thinking quickly
That's
about the
yeah,
answer to
no,
that.
yeah.
So I think some of the skill sets haven't changed. I mean, for one, curiosity is always incredibly important. Like, why is this way? Is this the best way? You know, why doesn't this work? How come nobody's ever done this before? I think a lot of those, sometimes they're called discovery skills, is how you discover opportunities, is by stepping back and asking some really good questions. The second one is about networking. If this pandemic has taught us more than ever that we need to be networked to each other to understand what's going on, to see different parts of a problem in ways that we've never seen them before. Actually, the beauty of the pandemic is that we can do that network in so many different ways. I mean,
it opened up.
It really did. This book came about from 20 years of these meetings, right?
Yeah.
And these were places we drove someplace and bought something and da-da-da. And so now, I mean, we're not driving places. We're still talking to entrepreneurs. I mean, we didn't stop talking to them, but we occasionally get together. But honestly, we can actually, the first 2 years of the pandemic, I would tell you, we were crazy with supporting and advising and, you know, trying to help think, how do we break through? What does this look like? What do we do different? And your ability to reach out to a broader audience to network is really high now.
Yeah. It's open up to the whole world, right? It's
around the whole world. Absolutely.
Yeah, I would add to that the journey of the entrepreneur innovator is in the way we frame it is it's much more about navigating uncertainty than taking risk. And there's an important difference between those two. First, actually, risk triggers a different part of your brain, but it's a more calculative assessment. It's probabilistic. It's like rolling dice or playing cards that, you know, these are games not of complete chance, and there are odds, right? And if you understand those odds, and you might make bets accordingly. Whereas navigating uncertainty, you don't know the distribution of probabilities. You know, we throw out averages of like 70% of startups fail, but what leads to that and what success looks like varies very dramatically. If nothing else, the COVID and the last 2 years have dramatically increased that degree of uncertainty. And some entrepreneurs have been in a position, you know, one of the things we counsel folks are look for points of inflection, right? Opportunities where something outside of your control, exogenous, occurs that allows for a rapid growth or escalation. So if you look at some industries, like virtual healthcare, telemedicine, things like that, food delivery, online, you know, you look at Zoom and what it stopped did during that period and what's happened since, you know, all of those went through this very positive inflection point. If on the other hand, you look at restaurants, things that travel, things that required, you know, face-to-face contact, those suffered a dramatic, you know, negative effect. So, and to some degree, that is good luck. You might just call it good luck, right? But to some degree, that's also chance favoring the prepared mind, that if you're able to deal with uncertainty and you look at how dramatically increasing uncertainty like COVID has creates opportunity as well as creates challenges, you're in a better place to be able to not just navigate, but take advantage of that uncertainty for a positive inflection point. And I think we've seen both sides of that equation over the last 2 years.
Yeah, it opened up. And so back to the failure, right? Where Kim said that, you know, validate your idea and not just have it in your head and saying, oh, I want it, right? What about, you know, who you're going to sell it to? How important is it, you know, with the willingness to observe or to listen and to learn? Because I'm sure to be an entrepreneur, you also need to be stubborn and saying, I want to do this, I'm working and doing it. But you also need to have the ability to learn and to reflect. So is there what I don't know what you call it, but is there has to be a balance in it that you need to be open and to learn. And have you seen any conflicts or any examples here, you know, where you're like, oh yeah, this was just a dead end?
Yeah, so that's really hard. I think one of the hardest questions we think that entrepreneurs should sometimes step back and ask, and it's really hard, is does the world need this startup?
Yeah.
Right. So like
Todd's, at least need it today, right?
Yeah, we see sometimes these zombies. It's sort of like moving forward is so difficult, but you know, stepping back is also really difficult. And so we like to think about how to look for signs. And some of these signs can be pretty inexpensive. So like Todd and I have been working on this case for an entrepreneurship class. Actually, Todd's mostly working on it. I'm trying to help him. And one of the questions he asked was, well, like, so how would we size? It's an idea about altitude sickness that, mostly occurs in mountains over 9,000 feet. And we came across it because we like to ski. And so it's a problem skiers have, right? Because when you go above 9,000 feet, then all of a sudden you get this altitude sickness and you don't feel great and you've wasted your vacation and all that.
Yeah.
And so I just pulled up like Google Trends and I looked up for a couple of keywords like altitude sickness, treatments for altitude sickness. And then one of the things, there's a drug for it. And there's also like this thing called an oxygen concentrator. And like we were just making little hypotheses about what we thought the data would look like. And on about half the things we were wrong, right? So it's like, look for it, but there are other things we were right. And so it works for the case, but it like made us change our assumptions of like, oh, well, I thought, like we thought it would be more prevalent in the winter than the summer. It's more prevalent in the summer than in the winter.
Yeah.
So because
more research and looking into it. And looking at it from different maybe perspective, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right.
So you looked in one perspective, and then if you're saying it's more in the summer.
Right. Or like 1 year versus 3 years. So you see trends, or we looked at different geographies. So we thought about all the mountainous areas, and it turns out that like one set of words are popular in 4 states. The other set of words are popular in 4 different states, so there's like all these kind of nuances that you can get. A lot of people use email in their marketing. One of the things I noticed as I was talking to a startup recently is that their open rates for their emails are increasing.
Yeah.
Well, they recently changed their target segment. So, that's validation. Like if nobody opens your emails, that's a clue.
Yeah.
Right. You have to look at your conversion, typical conversion rates in marketing at like 3%. So if you're, well below 3%, you've got a problem. If you're well over 10%, hey, that's a really good sign.
That's a happy problem. No, it's not a problem.
Not a problem.
Yeah.
So can I follow up on that a little bit, Santa? Just because I think the original question was spot on in terms of how entrepreneurs can be curious, but also ask the right questions.
Yeah.
And Kim referenced discovery skills, which is based on some work with Clay Christensen and colleagues, Jeff Dyer and others, who looked at these what they call innovator IQ, and what are some of the contributors. And one of those is observing. And entrepreneurs want to change the world, right? They're passionate. They want to get out there and they want to share their solution. But just sit back and watch first for a little bit, understand the problem from the customer's perspective. And that's one of the big debt burdens that we see entrepreneurs, particularly technology-oriented entrepreneurs, face, is like, they want you to see their solution. Like, look at this, look at what I've done, I've solved your problem. And the customer's like, what problem? What? I didn't know. I didn't even know. Because the entrepreneur never sat back to kind of, understand the problem, understand the customer's perspective, how they refer to the problem, how they talk about it, what's the key language that they use, so that when they start to put together that solution, they're putting it in the frame of reference that the customer understands instead of their own frame of reference. So, pulling together some of that, observing, questioning, the importance of those and curiosity with why do some startups fail? What are some of the challenges entrepreneurs face? I just want to connect that thread before we moved on.
So is it also important that, so instead of, because I know I jump to conclusion or saying, oh, this is the solution, and then saying, okay, fine, right? But let's just jump a little bit back and then rethink it again or observe more. And then you can reframe and find out if it's actually the right solution or maybe modify it some.
Here's the sliced bread. Yeah, but I didn't even want a sandwich, right? Yeah. Find out what the customer wants to eat before you offer them sliced bread.
But then when you have to expand as an entrepreneur or adding people to your team, how do you then navigate and find the right people?
That is so hard. And we do actually have a little blowout in the book and also on our website, a blog post of when should you hire your first employee, right? That's the hard thing. Early on, of course, every entrepreneur, and even later, I mean, you can talk to entrepreneurs who've been at it for 10 years, they'll tell you like chief bottle washer, chief janitor, chief accountant, chief salesman. Like there's a lot of hats that you definitely get to wear, but there is a cost for you wearing all those hats. So you really have to step back and ask yourself, is the business generating enough money that the time that I'm doing those things are revenue lost?
Yeah.
Right. So if my time could be better spent at something else, then it's time to figure out how to hire someone. So like I started a program at the Kelley School. So I like to innovate, in education. And I was the recruiter. I was like everything. I was the teacher, recruiter, everything. And so I was like, I'm not a great recruiter. That's not my skill set. That's not my job. I told my boss, we need to hire a recruiter. I hired a part-time recruiter. The ROI on him was like tenfold, maybe 15.
Yeah.
Single highest ROI for the school in their marketing activities. Simply because we said, hey, this is not an effective use of my time. We could make more money if we use somebody else's time. You have to use that same sort of discipline to say, what are the things I'm doing that are big time sucks that we're not getting an ROI on? And how do I farm this out? And maybe you start out with outsourced.
Yeah. So like less risk in the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then maybe because you only have part-time work, and maybe that person eventually comes on. Our favorite local stories is we have a company that started in email marketing, and they went public, and then they got bought by Salesforce. And the person who was the first employee from the first email company is still here in town, still does tech consulting, is now, a vice president or CEO, I can't remember, of a branch of SAP. And, I always go back to what made them decide to hire you. She has a great story to tell. And that first employee can go a long way with the company.
Yeah.
She worked for that company up until about 2 years ago. So like a better part of 25 years.
Wow. That's long.
That's long.
Yeah. How important is this then for an entrepreneur or a startup, to have good mentorship? And is it something as well where they're like, I don't have time, and then they're just running, where they should have stopped up? What's your advice here?
You should tee up our paper, Todd.
So in the book, we actually talk about 3 different categories of activity, and we actually reference mountain biking. We did a mountain biking trip in Moab a few years ago and went through a training camp, and the instructor, who was great, and she talked about the constant mix when you're mountain biking of scanning ahead enough to know where the trail's going so you can start to make subtle adjustments and not go off trail. But you also have to look at the now. You have to look like 2 to 3 seconds in front of you to make sure that, like, if you put your foot down or if you fall, you're not falling into the cactus or the poisonous snake or something like that. And those are good things to know, arguably. So that constant scanning back and forth between the now and the next. But in the book, we talk about another layer, which is the navigation piece, the stepping back and looking, is the venture moving in the direction that we want it to? And how are we getting there? What are some of the key strategic pieces to make sure, and some of the metrics to know whether we're actually on course or not? The equivalent of mountain biking, of course, is, are you doing a 1.5 hour ride or a 3 hour ride? And is there water in between? Or what do you need to plan for to be able to actually survive the whole journey? And what does success in the journey look like? And that's where mentors and advisors, I think, can be really helpful, is enforcing that mechanism to kind of step back and think about the whole business, where it's heading or where it's not heading, and get advice and connections. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I think a lot of entrepreneurs are so busy with the now and the next that they never step back for that navigation. And that's a great role that advisors or mentors can play, I think.
So how do you go and find the mentors?
Well, interestingly, we have a paper, it's under submission, so we crossing our fingers it'll do well, but kind of the big results or key insights that were in there were that existing entrepreneurs who invest are actually really good people to look at. And so sometimes you feel like, so in our local community, we have 2 or 3 organizations that bring people and resources and previous entrepreneurs together to share stories and talk about how do we do this better and all that. And I think sometimes someone who's already been successful, a serial entrepreneur, might be kind of intimidating for a new entrepreneur to talk to. But actually, they're the most likely to help you.
Yeah.
As they understand exactly what you did, and now they have money that they're deploying. So they put their investor hat on, they put their founder hat on, they know how hard it was, they know what kind of persistence you need, and they're going to be the ones who are going to give you the most help. There's that whole social contract of paying it back,
Yeah.
somebody helped them. And so they want to help people. And so get in those entrepreneurship circles. Most large cities have them. If you don't, your chamber of commerce, your co-working spaces. I mean, the beauty of entrepreneurs is they find each other. They're a tribe unlike any other, and they love to support each other. And so you just go in there and you start asking questions, and you help them want to help you.
Yeah.
And that one of the great things about the entrepreneurial community, and this is true of investors, like angel groups and even VCs, it's not a zero-sum proposition. If you co-invest with someone and the venture wins, everybody wins. And you're not trying to protect an investment from, I don't want anybody else to invest in this because we're the only ones who want the returns. The startup investment community doesn't work that way. And in our experience, fortunately, the entrepreneurial community doesn't work that way, that people are very generous with their time and energy. A twist on that I would add that I think is really important is there's an assumption under going and seeking mentoring or advising that the entrepreneur is self-aware enough to know what their gaps are. Yeah. And unfortunately, that is not always the case. So I think thinking through systematically, like, what are my strengths? And so for technology-oriented entrepreneurs, they may know a lot about the technology itself and development and product and developing a prototype, et cetera, but have significant gaps on the funding side, on the sales and marketing side, and those are places where they could get help. The more sales or marketing oriented entrepreneur that identifies an opportunity probably has some significant deficits in the technology and product development side, how to package that, what that looks like. So first of all, just being self-aware and recognizing where you have gaps, and there are mechanisms for actually kind of looking at that across those different domains of industry expertise, technical expertise, sales and marketing, and funding, financial expertise, and how those all work together. And recognizing where you particularly need help so that you can be a little more intentional about that networking to fill those gaps.
Yeah. So an important skill, right? An important skill. Yeah.
Now it's really hard to develop self-awareness if you completely lack it. And there are some entrepreneurs we have tried for 20 years and it's still like,
Yeah, so I was just talking with a startup this week. It was one of my students who took the leap and joined a startup, and he came from sales and they were from tech. And so as he's like sharing things with me, I'm like, I'm still not seeing marketing here,
Important piece.
I mean, sales and marketing are related to each other, but we need like some marketing strategies, So he sent me something that he had done from my class. I'm like, this is a really good start, but don't take this the wrong way. It's written by a sales guy, right? So we're kind of sort of missing the so what, right? So we have some really nice features. And so what do those do?
Yeah.
What's the benefit to people? Oh, yeah, the benefit. Yeah, the benefit.
What about goal setting? Because again, right, you have to look ahead, and we did already talk a little bit about it. But how do you set up like realistic goals, or how do you advise and guide and saying this is realistic, or bringing them down to earth a little bit, if that's needed?
Very hard to bring entrepreneurs down to earth, and you definitely look like a Debbie Downer if you try. So we try not to do that so much. we try to help them.
What kind of wording are you then using?
So let's play this forward. What does 3 months from now look like? Yeah. What would be some key results that we would expect? Oh, so you really want to get these advocates. Okay. What does it take to get 10 advocates? How about 100 advocates? How about 1,000 advocates? So what are you going to do to, we try to get it to be tactical almost. Like, let's go from this, big pie in the sky to what does that really mean? Let's get some head counts on this.
Yeah.
So you say
asking the right questions, or asking more questions to get the thought
Yeah. So you need 32,000 transactions. All right. So how many transactions does any one of your individual customers do? Okay. 1,400. Okay. So, divide 32,000 by 1,400. How many do you need? Do you have the resource? That kind of, we work backwards from that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So changing the world is kind of a hard thing to measure and may take a little bit more than a few months, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
while, that's where the entrepreneur may be, as Kim and you were both suggesting, kind of dialing that back to measurable steps. And the really good thing about the story that creates is, at least in our opinion, that's what investors and supporters are looking for, is someone that is able to say, initially here was our goal and we wanted to get 10 paying customers in our first 3 months. And we only got 7, but here's what we learned we were doing wrong. And here's what we changed. And by the way, in the next 3 months, we got another 20 paying customers. Okay. So that's what people are looking for. They're not looking for the answer necessarily, or, the up and like the hockey stick up and to the right.
Yeah.
They're looking for the entrepreneur that is systematically making hypotheses, is going to get some things wrong. How do they bounce back and navigate that uncertainty so that they're better at it the next time and are continuing to learn? And I think some entrepreneurs are very afraid of sharing where they missed the mark. Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes they could make, is embrace that and show how you responded, learn more, and got better. And that's what people are going to invest in.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, a really great example of a company we've been working with for the last year or two. They started out wanting to develop something that would be a device for humans in the area of of getting pregnant. And
the opposite.
The opposite of contraception. And they were just seeing so many barriers. And so we started asking, well, what about animals? Are there animals where we have these same issues that maybe there's a reasonable scale? And so they jumped into one of these accelerators to learn how to pitch and all of these kinds of things. And they didn't get any money. But then as they were working on this and kind of dialing it forward, they got a vet school on board. They got a vet to work very closely with them. They got accepted into a animal-based accelerator type program that included a cash, right? And so now all of a sudden they're pitching to angel investors because they now are investable. Yeah. And the money they need to execute, to actually put this product in the market, they've already gotten a third of that before they've done their first angel pitch.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they've met a lot of really nice cows. I mean,
they've met a lot of really nice cows.
You have to look at the bright side. That's good. Okay, so I really, you have so much knowledge here. So I'm sure, if you have to look back, right, 20 years ago, and you have to give yourself an advice, what kind of advice will you give yourself?
I can tackle this one because he talked a little bit about risk and uncertainty, and I can tell you that I am really financially risk averse, so I don't gamble. And also I discovered through this process that I really dislike uncertainty. And there's a whole story that goes with that. That has to do with mountain bikes in Germany and being lost. And wanting to go back the way we came because we know it, instead of going a way that we don't know anything about, so I have to constantly talk to myself about this uncertainty thing. It's my type A planning personality that doesn't like it. But I was once offered a year's salary to take an early retirement and leave the company. And I was so afraid of starting my own business that I didn't do it. And that's what I would tell myself. I would say, you know what, you've got something that you're capable of doing. You just jump in and try it. Worst case, it's not successful and you have to go to plan B, but just jump in.
Yeah, just do it.
Yeah. And so when you say 20 years, my frame of reference goes, okay, where were we 20 years ago? And I tend to think more of specific inflection points. And fortunately, I don't look back and go, man, if I had only chosen path A instead of path B, I feel like we've ended up in a very fortunate place and, got a great family, we're professionally we're able to just do really fun and interesting and hopefully important work for our students and the community. And any dramatic change in any decisions historically could have affected that. So there was that one time I wore the wrong shoes in my first marathon, and have struggled with knee issues ever since. So that's probably
the advice.
yeah, like don't wear those shoes.
Or maybe try things out before you jump in. Make sure you've got, a little bit of experiment to know what you're really getting into.
Yeah. No, that's a good advice. So if there's any of the listener, right, that want to reach out to you, how can they come in contact with you?
Well, so the good news is I think we are the only two Saxtons at Indiana University. So you can go to Indiana University Kelley School of Business and type in Saxton, and you'll find one of the two of us online. Also, we have a website, the titaniceffect.com. And believe it or not, people who read our book do send us emails to the website. We're having lunch with one of those on Monday. So
nice.
We do respond. What else, Todd?
Feel free to email us directly. So we're both at Indiana University. So it's at IU, like indianauniversity.edu. I'm T Saxton, T-S-A-X-T-O-N. Kim is M-K Saxton, S-A-X-T-O-N. And please feel free to reach out. We love to connect with innovators, entrepreneurs. If we can be helpful, happy to do that, but also happy to connect you to other folks that are in a position to do so. So thanks for the opportunity.
Perfect. And I'll continue.
I was gonna say, we have like a 2 coffee rule, even that, we'll have coffee with you twice before we have to do something more formal.
Okay, I need some coffee then. No, okay, I'll make sure to put the link in the show notes, and it will also be on the website on Mind Innovation under this episode. So you will have easy, to contact both of you. So thank you so much. It was awesome, and just to learn better on what to do and what not to do. And I really like the skills, because I think the skill set right now is just exploding what you need to have in your. I always call it in my backpack. But thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having us. Great questions, and good luck to all the innovators out there, and enjoy the journey.
Yeah, it's a long one.
What will you do to unlock innovation?